Hi everybody, I'm Jimmy Dore. Welcome to another fantastic interview here on TYT Interviews. My guest today is Bryan Burghart, and he's the editor and publisher of the Reno News and Review, and as well as the developer and curator of a great new website called fatalencounters.org, which he describes as an impartial, comprehensive, and searchable national database of people killed during interactions with law enforcement. So basically, a list of everybody who's been killed by the police, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, Brian. How are you? Welcome to the show. Thanks for being our guest.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, can you just give us a little bit about your background? I know you write for the Reno News and Review, and how did this? Give me an idea how this all started. You have a website where you compile the list of names of all the people who have been murdered by the police. Isn't there already a website like? I mean, don't they already have that statistics?
They don't actually have those statistics, and the word murder isn't actually accurate. Murder is a legal term. What we're talking about is killings that may turn out to be, murder in a few cases, but usually they're clean, for lack of a better term. I've been a journalist for more than 20 years. I've worked for some national media. I've been editor of the Reno News and Review since 2002. But I've basically worked there most of my career. For a couple of years, I was a stringer for Time magazine. I was a freelance writer, and earlier in my career, before I became editor, I was able to do investigative reports, which, as you know, are very time consumptive. So I hadn't been able to do any for quite a few years. So anyway, this site started. I was driving home from work, and I saw just this scene of chaos with more police cars than I'd ever seen outside a police station parking lot. And I just knew instinctively that somebody had died there, and I presumed it wasn't a police officer. So I went home and I turned on the app on my phone, the scanner app, and I discovered that I was right. It was somebody had been killed by police. So I started looking around. I wanted to know how often that happened. It seemed like a fairly simple task to, I'd go to the FBI Uniform Crime Report and the information would be there. Well, I went to the Uniform Crime Report and it wasn't there. I tried to look around local media to see, if I could just determine for Washoe County how often it had happened. And every story I looked at lacked that crucial piece of information that, that context. This is the nth time that somebody has been killed by police in Nevada or in Washoe County or whatever jurisdiction they wanted. It was just never there. And I basically chalked it up to lame local media.
You see a police incident by your house. You see more cops than you've ever seen before. So you go to check out who got murdered. And and so you run into the fact that you can't find out who was murdered. Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's when I didn't know for sure that time, and I didn't have a dog in the fight,
Yeah.
So when I couldn't find it after an hour or so, I moved on. I went to do something more productive.
Okay.
But it was a few months later that another kid was killed. 18-year-old freshman at the University of Southern Alabama. His name was Gil Collar. And he was naked, and he went to the police station, presumably for help. He was on drugs, or maybe it was a prank. I mean, I really don't know. I've heard both stories, actually. So the officer, without using any less lethal methods, taser, I guess you can't use a taser on bare skin, or they say, or a nightstick, or called for backup, or a beanbag gun. There's a lot of different methods that could have been used, but they kind of danced around a bit. Never got with the caller. Never got within 5 feet of the officer, and they're off camera, and all of a sudden the kid's dead. So I started looking again. And that's when I came across a story that was in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And it had a paragraph that said it very succinctly. There is no national database to look this stuff up. And actually, that story in the Las Vegas Review-Journal was the most comprehensive story about police shootings that I had seen. And I'd seen, several in my searches. So I believed them.
So you find out, so you go, so there's another murder happens, college kid naked, all of a sudden he's killed in very suspect circumstances by the cops. The questions you have, why didn't they tase him? But again, what you wanted to find out was the list of how many people the police have been killing, and you found out they don't keep these records, right? There is no national database.
There is no national, there's only mine.
There's only what?
There was no national database.
Yeah, right. You have you are now compiling a database at fatalencounters.org.
Right.
But the police, the FBI, local police, municipalities, counties, states, they don't keep these records on how many fatalities occur at the hands of police. No one keeps these records?
Different jurisdictions keep it in different ways. For example, in the Northeast, some of those places have state oversight if there's an officer-involved shooting. So I've got 6 where I was able to go to a state website and pull off the information for that. That's the extreme rarity in the United States. Many places don't even report names. They don't report the names of officers. For example, in Philadelphia, which has, quite a large number of police shootings, they never report rarely report the officer's name, and rarely report the person who was killed name. It's up to media to find out.
Do they give you a reason why they don't report the names?
That's a law.
Yeah, but
there's a law that says they don't have to.
Really? So that's because in Missouri there's an opposite law. We just saw in Ferguson the law was you have to release the name, which
it's different everywhere.
So it's different everywhere. It just kind of shocks me a little bit that you can have government agents shooting citizens in secret.
It blew me away.
That's kind of
It changed my life. Let's put it that way.
Oh, okay. So you weren't aware that was the way. I wasn't aware either until this conversation. So they didn't release the names of the cops. So this is in Philadelphia. That's just kind of that's their natural order of course. That's their routine. That's what they're supposed to do is keep this name secret of the cop who shot a citizen.
Yes, and they also keep the citizen's name secret. So it's up to media.
So tell the people. Brian, can you tell the people what does that mean exactly? So if you don't have the police officer's name and you don't have the victim's name or the person who was killed, what does that mean to a journalist?
It means there's no story.
It means
the story will be reported that somebody was shot, and that's usually where it ends. Because if you put yourself in that reporter's shoes that night, these things usually happen at night, in the most dangerous parts of town, on deadline, or maybe even after deadline. It's basically no name. It becomes, who, what, where, when, who, it's it's the 5 W's and an H. It's like, if you don't have that, it's not a story.
Yeah, so if you don't have the names of the people involved, basically you just have a bunch of verbs. And you don't really have the information you need to tell the story. So you're saying that when a police shooting of a citizen happens, it usually happens in the evening or late at night, and the reporters are on deadline. The police don't release the name, so they don't ever write about it because there's no information to write about, so there isn't a story. So you decided to take it upon yourself and start collecting a database of all the people who were killed by police, right? And that's at fatalencounters.org. Now can you tell the people, when you started to compile this database, what were some of the problems you ran into?
I'm a journalist, so I want to go from public documents, right? The idea of creating this database from reports that other journalists did just kind of went against the grain. So my original idea was to make public records requests of every state and local law enforcement agency that contributes to the FBI's Uniform Crime Report. So there's about 16,000 of them. I made a FOIA, since it's federal, Freedom of Information Act request of the FBI. I asked for an electronic version of their mailing list, so basically a database, which I was within my rights to ask for. It's not uncommon. So they turned me down flat.
So you're contacting the FBI. You're asking the FBI, well, if you don't keep these records, I'll contact each individual police department and I'll ask them for their data, and they wouldn't provide it to you?
Well, I didn't tell them what I wanted it for. It's none of their business what I want the addresses for.
Oh, okay.
But they turned me down flat. So then I rewrote the request to make it broader. I asked for any documents related to this. So they sort of answered, and you can find it on the website. What they did was they printed out this database that they claimed did not exist. They printed it out. Then they, on like 8.5 by 14 sheets, and then they scanned it in 8.5 by 11 vertical. The 8.5 by 14 were horizontal, and then they turned it into a photograph, a JPEG, not a PDF that I could possibly use this. So the information was not only split, but was so that the end of the address wasn't with the beginning. But it was also in a photograph, so even if I could have, determined if there was some kind of pattern to how they printed it out, I couldn't have used it anyway. Not without a great deal of effort.
So they finally decide to give you some of the information you requested that they first said didn't exist, and then when they decided to give it to you, they gave it to you in a format that was unusable. Now, why do you think they wanted to block your access to this information? Just kind of like knee-jerk, that's what the FBI does, or?
No, typically when somebody answers a FOIA, they usually do it, they give you what you ask for. I mean, they may give you 10,000 documents. It's not uncommon to get a box that size. But this obviously they did not want me to have this information. They didn't want me to be able to use it no matter what my purpose was. So I found another agency within the Department of Justice called the U.S. Census of State and Local Law Enforcement Agencies. And so rather than doing a FOIA with them, I just called the lead statistician and asked him if I could have their mailing list. So within probably 10 days, I had it on an Excel spreadsheet.
Really?
And it wasn't just the ones that participated in the UCR. It was all of them, 17,985. So if you go to fatalencounters.org, there's a thing called the Public Records Tool. You can find out all the state and local law enforcement agencies in your either state or county, however you want to search it. And I don't believe this existed until I created the database. So that was the first part, and that took over 8 months of trying to deal with the FBI. So I realized that I could potentially just not be able to do it, which did not satisfy me at all. So I started this secondary idea of I was going to crowdsource media reports. So I created a form on the website so that people could submit, and I spent some time populating it. I'm in addition to being the editor of the newspaper, I'm also a dual master's student. So I actually had an internship for one of my masters, and they let me intern for myself. So I spent a month compiling as many as I could in a month, which it broke down to about 500, over 150 hours. So at that point, I had made public records requests of all the state and local law enforcement agencies in Nevada. So I had a comprehensive list for Nevada, and it was the first time that any state had ever had a list, let alone in a database that people could search. So then I started adding others on as I came across stories, or if I came across databases, like the LA Times has a great one, or there was a newspaper in Portland, Maine, that did all of Maine. So Maine was the second one that I was able to get. So now we're up to, we're right around 1,700 incidents in there. But there's this other spreadsheet that I created that includes everything that I could scrape off the web. There's basically 9,000 incidents on it. So I asked contributors to pick a line on it and do further research on one line. It takes about 20 minutes, and it goes into actually a fact checking queue before it goes to the database. But it will make its way to the database.
How are people really contributing? I mean, what have you compiled so far?
Well, in the actual database, there's 17 or 1,800 incidents. 1,750 maybe. I'm not quite sure where it was. It's been a couple days.
You know, I read the article you wrote in Gawker, and you said the lack of a database. You know, that the FBI doesn't have this database, the government doesn't have this database. You feel it's intentional?
I absolutely do. There's a law that requires them to keep this information, and they've been ignoring that law for 20 years.
So what of the research you've been doing, what have you found out about police killings that kind of raised your eyebrows? Besides the fact that they're not transparent about doing it.
I think the biggest thing I discovered that kind of blew me away, I mean, we know anecdotally that race plays a huge factor in police killings. What I didn't know was that mentally ill people are they represent maybe 30% of the people killed by police. That just blew me away.
Do you think this is just lack of training, that they don't know how to deal with? So I have a few theories about policing in the United States, and maybe you can tell me if your research can either debunk it or back it up or coincides. My theories are that they're not trained to de-escalate situations anymore. They're trained to escalate, and it started with the drug war, which kind of gave cops super constitutional powers. And then when 9/11 happened, those got just exponentially accelerated. And so now the police they're taught. In fact, there was a Department of Homeland Security directive that I got a hold of that told police departments across the country to view peaceful protesters as potential terrorists. So I guess the bigger point is that the police no longer see their job as to protect the rights of citizens and serve them, but they see them as an occupying force, and the citizens are now the enemy. So they don't see the citizen as the person they're sworn to serve. They see the citizen as the enemy, and they're never taught to de-escalate a situation. They're only taught to escalate situations. And if someone doesn't follow your lawful command, you as a police officer can now escalate the violence, which seems to happen all the time, every day. It never seems to go the other way. I mean, we just saw the horrific scenes in Ferguson with cops sitting on tanks and with overly militarized. So that's my theory of why 30% of the people killed by police are mentally ill, because they're not trained to deal with anything, and their training is give someone a command. If they don't follow it, shoot them.
I think you're not too far from the truth with this. I mean, it particularly with mentally ill people, it makes logical sense. They are not going to react in ways that somebody else who's in their right mind would, right? They may not realize that having a gun and waving it at anybody else will get them killed. It's not a question of maybe. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean.
So it does make sort of sense that they would be highly represented in these numbers. However, there are places like in my hometown in Reno, Nevada. There's the Most team, which is pretty cutting edge for Reno, Nevada. But one officer, Travis Warren is his name, and he works with 3 psychologists. And what they do is they go out and they interact with these mentally ill people before they get in crisis. so that if a crisis comes up, there'll be recognition, there'll be, camaraderie, friendship. So 2 years ago in Reno, Nevada, there were 4 people killed by police. 3 of them were mentally ill. So, I mean, that year, 75% of the people killed by police were mentally ill. This year, we've had 2 killings thus far this year, and neither of them were mentally ill. And I think that shows that the training is the issue. Because now we've got people with training on how to deal with mentally ill people, and the numbers seem to go down. I mean, you can't really tell anything over just 1 year.
Right.
But it's what it looks like.
And let me ask you a question just in general. Has your research, can you speak to are police killings going up? Are they going down? Have they been staying the same? Does your research speak to any of those questions?
It's too early to tell that, and part of that, like, I think I have probably 10% at this point. You got to remember the website launched on February 28th, so it's only been 6 months.
Okay.
So part of it is that people are reporting new stuff. I go back to 2000. So in states like Nevada, where I have historic data, you can look and determine whether they've gone up, and they have. I have 7 states now that you can look at historic data and determine whether they've gone up. So they have.
So police shootings police killings are increasing, even though they don't want us to see the data. 30% of all people killed by police are mentally ill people, which obviously points to a lack of training. Well, how you would give somebody a gun, send them out to handle a mentally ill person with no training on how to handle a mentally ill person, is certainly a failure of police departments from coast to coast, right? Now, can I ask, what's the biggest group of people who get killed by the police?
What do you mean, men?
Men, but
by far.
So is there any...
Like 96%.
96% of people killed by police are men. That kind of makes sense. Most violent criminals are male, correct? But is there a disparity in the race? I'm guessing there is.
There is. It's borne out in the data. For example, in Nevada, from 2000 to 2014, we had 211 killings. And I don't just do shootings. I also... vehicle accidents or tasings or just whatever it happens to be, asphyxiation, beating to death.
So you're saying you're including any action by a police officer that causes the death of a citizen.
Exactly. Okay. And I mean, let me explain that in a minute. So in Nevada, there were 211 people killed by police. 100 of them were white. That means 111 or 17 of them, we couldn't determine the race, as I recall, it was 17. That means basically it's an even number of white people and people of color, which, I mean, African Americans are hugely overrepresented in these numbers. Mexican or Hispanic Latinos are overrepresented.
So
it basically proves what we've known anecdotally, but since we didn't have the numbers, we could never say.
And so now we're getting the numbers now. So blacks, Hispanics way overrepresented in the numbers. So they're being killed by police at a way higher number than white people are, and also the mentally ill are being killed way overrepresented in the numbers of people being killed by police. Those are just amazing. Now, why do you think that you're the first?
No, it's not the numbers. I'm sorry. They're not overrepresented by numbers. They're overrepresented by rates.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Because
correct. Thanks. You're right.
Okay.
So now here's the thing that why do you think other journalists haven't been on this before you? Why are you the first one to get on this?
I think part of it is we didn't really understand how the internet worked. I mean, obviously, all right, so it's 2014 now, but when you look at the data going back to 2000, before like 2007, it's really sketchy whether you're going to be able to find information about something. So it wasn't really possible until, say, the last 5 or 6 years. So, I mean, I don't know. This is a natural for one of the big media outlets. The LA Times is doing a great database on this. The Las Vegas Review-Journal did a great database on local. But why a national media outlet hasn't chosen to do this, I speculate about that all the time. I think they just thought it was hard or couldn't be done well enough or something.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it's a lot of work, right? So I don't know about national news people. They don't seem to have a good work ethic. Anyway.
Yeah, but they've got a lot of resources. You could pay somebody to do this.
I agree. You could hire college interns and smarty pants people like Alan Dershowitz does. They do all their work for him, and then. But here, let me ask you a question that's on everybody's minds about what do you think the impact of militarization of our police forces have been?
Well, it has certainly created kind of a new sort of fear. You know, I mean, you used the words occupying force before, and that's kind of what it felt like in Ferguson and in Albuquerque. It creates it's a different. I mean, people. I don't want to say they've always been afraid of police, but you're always kind of intimidated by police. This is a different level of fear with the militarization. I mean, we are not accustomed to seeing tanks on our soil, you know? And earlier you said something that kind of clicked with me, that maybe the people are perceived as the enemy. And what it reminds me of was, do you remember when they asked Rumsfeld, what Donald Rumsfeld said when somebody asked him how many civilian casualties there were in Iraq?
No, what was his answer?
He basically said we don't count the enemy. So in the United States, we do count police who are killed by criminals, but we don't count the people who are killed by police. So, I mean, is that analogous? Because it kind of feels that way to me.
Yes.
So in the United States, all right, so, you know, we have the 3 branches of government, and we think of the judicial being the one that has sort of a right to kill people, you know, capital punishment. And since 2000, there have been 790 people killed through the judicial system. And again, we don't know how many people have been killed extrajudicially. I suspect that it's going to turn to be in the neighborhood of 16,000.
You think 16,000 people since 2000? Since 2000?
Yeah.
So that's in addition to the judicial killings, or that's combined?
No, they're separate.
Okay, so you're saying you think there's you think so your estimated number, which is certainly the most reliable number we're going to find anywhere, is that you're going to estimate 16,000 citizens in the United States have been killed by police action since 2000.
Yes.
But there is no database from this. There's no place to go look this up. The FBI is not compiling these statistics. They don't make them available. In fact, when you try to research this stuff, they put up brick walls for you to do that. So, by the way, this is great work you're doing. I really appreciate it.
They do, by the way, put out a report that is holier than Swiss cheese. It's called Justifiable Homicide. 1998 through 2012, and they claim, the FBI, who are experts at data, claim that it's about 400 a year.
Oh.
However, they're lying. They don't. In that study, there were about, according to USA Today, there were about 750 agencies that participated in that study. Of the 17,985 state and local law enforcement agencies, about 750 participated. My data guy says it was actually about 1,200, but he can't determine if some of these were over multiple years, or if, he can't determine. I'm sorry, there's a word for this, that each one is a unique report. At any rate, no, like for example, the state of Florida did not report. So when they put out these numbers, they're telling a quarter of the story. It's like Ray Rice saying, "Yeah, I was helping my wife off the elevator."
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that was true.
Yes,
but it kind of depends on what quarter of the story you're going to tell, right?
So you're kind of discovering a pattern of kind of organized misinformation from police culture from coast to coast about how many citizens they're killing. So there's pretty much a misinformation campaign from the police culture to the public, right? That's what you're saying?
I would distinguish between the police culture and the FBI.
Okay.
Police, when I do a formal public records request, generally speaking, they just give it to me. They just give me the information I want. I mean, the roadblocks is they want to charge me a bunch of money, and I paid for every bit of this out of my pocket. So when Las Vegas Metro wants $180 for their records, or Boise, Idaho wants about the same for theirs, that is a block. That is actually something I can't overcome to a certain extent. But other places, for example, the Boise State Police, they just flat out refuse to follow the law.
Really?
First they lied to me. They said that they had no records, and while I was just doing regular research, I happened to cross a killing by a state trooper in Idaho. So I sent it to the person who sent me a letter that said that this information did not exist, and said, "How is it possible that you don't have records of this?" So then they sent me another response and said that they didn't have to respond because it was an exception to state law, which again, it's not. I went and looked at the state law. It was just a lie. And then when the state attorney general got it, not the attorney general, but the assistant or deputy attorney general, sorry, I can't remember what the title is. When that person got involved, she basically says, "Well, this is hard, so we're not going to respond. And you can sue us." I mean, I can't sue them.
Right.
That's absurd. So it's a de facto denial,
Right. Well, it's it's shocking and I guess expected at the same time. So they're both it's just how brazen they are, and it's also shocking that what you're talking about, that how can someone with more power behind them, like someone on a national news level from CNN or New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, how come they haven't held the feet to the fire to the Boise State Police? How come they're not interested in this stuff? So that's a great question. But listen, we're running out of time, Brian. Let me just ask you, what are the plans for the future of your database?
Well, we're going to continue collecting data. I mean, eventually, it's a finite number. I don't know what that number is, and I can't know, but eventually we'll be caught up, and then we'll just be keeping up with it. Okay. And I would be perfectly happy if one of these major media outlets wanted to take it over. I mean, it is a lot of work, and I can't do it as well as somebody with 1,000 times the resources I have.
Right. I hear you. So now how can interested people, how can they help? If someone wants to help your cause, what can they do for you?
Okay. They can donate on the website. They can donate some money to help me pay for records, pay for interns, whatever. And the website, let me give the website, fatalencounters.org, right? That's right.
Okay.
They can also go to the Submit Fatal Encounters, which has clear description of how to research each of these incidents. And as I said, I've got 9,000. They don't even have to go out and look for a new one. I've got about 9,000 that they can research and add to the database.
Gotcha.
Or they can add new incidents as they happen, or if they know of a database or they know of a state that collects this information at the state level, they can send me that information and we can FOIA from that. And they can make public records requests of their local jurisdictions. For example, one lawyer in Texas took the information off my website, off the public records tool, and has made public records requests of every state and local law enforcement agency in the state of Texas. So that's 1,700 agencies. So I'll be getting that hopefully soon.
Okay. All right. Well, I encourage everybody to go over to fatalencounters.org and contribute in any way you can. You can help them research already flagged stuff. You can add to it. You can donate. I'm going to donate. I think it's a great project. I can't believe the government, the FBI, isn't doing this. It falls to good citizens like our friend Bryan Burghart at the Reno News and Review to put together a database of all the people who were killed by police in the United States. So, Brian, thank you very much for coming on, and good luck in the future. And I really appreciate the good work you're doing over there, and I want everybody to go over to fatalencounters.org. Brian, thank you very much for being on TYT Interviews.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.